Reaction to but it's just important. Because,
okay, let's get the reaction.
Yeah,
first.
well, they first came from Lucy, right?
Yeah.
So what happened?
So Lucy G, 8-year-old Lucy Geist, not terribly interested in the debate per
she's
se,
8,
but
she's 8.
She's walking in and out of the room. She hears things. She picks things up. She's doing her little Lego thing, and as she hears that exchange, she turns to Dad. Didn't he just say that?
Oh, wow.
You heard him.
You're 8-year-old.
There you go. I think we're done here. I don't even need to go to the next reaction.
Oh, my gosh.
What do you think?
Well, let me ask you, Mark. Why did he keep repeating the same lines over and over again? Like, is that something new that he said?
That's a line from his stump speech. It's a line that he relies on to frame the election, but I've never seen anything like it in my career to repeat the line. And Chris Christie, who planned for weeks to hit him that weekend, that night, he couldn't have possibly imagined that it would work out as well as it did.
Couldn't have asked for a better night. You know, it's interesting that Chris Christie has accused Marco Rubio of repeating the same speech. I'm at the front of the room. My father's bartender back there for 6 years. He actually been saying that for like a decade.
Well, why would he be saying that?
Frank Luntz actually went down to Florida, and they focus grouped Marco Rubio, basically, while he was running for Speaker. The Florida State Party gave Frank Luntz $345,000. It's in the public records. And he created this narrative. And Marco Rubio has been repeating the same thing, John Heilman, for 10 years. You would just expect not to repeat the same lines from the same 10-year-old speech 4 times in a debate.
Right. Well, there's 2 things about this, right? One is that that's obviously an intensely focused grouped line. They think that line works. So that's why he uses it. Why he used it 4 times in the space of that debate, it's a little baffling, as Mark said. But I do think the problem that arises from it is that it reinforces one of these things that reinforces the suspicions and negative caricatures that are out there about Marco Rubio, right? So people think he's overly programmed, that he's robotic, that he's... has no
It's kind of all you could see all night.
So to do that, then, I think the worst kind of mistake you can make is the mistake that reinforces an existing caricature, right? So that is kind of now stuck to him in a kind of...
Well, you know, I mean, Mike, that's what we've been saying, or at least I've been saying more aggressively on this show for about 6 months, that he's robotic, that he's programmatic, and the Rubio campaign has been whining about that and trying to spread stories around to reporters saying, oh, he doesn't like us. Because I said that he looks at times like he's running for SGA president. And he certainly did that night, and it wasn't personal. But what I said for 6 months
well, you're being accused of it.
Was exposed during that debate.
He proved all those themes Saturday night. I'm with Mark on this. I have never seen an event, never mind a debate, a rally up here. I've never seen one where one incident, and that thing between Christie and Rubio was an incident, froze the race. Froze the race and defined one of the candidates, Marco Rubio. John and I were with Chris Christie yesterday afternoon in Exeter, New Hampshire, and we were talking to him about the night before. And he said something. He said, you know, like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face.
Until they get hit in the face, and that's exactly
right.
Chris Christie, Mark Halperin, Chris Christie completely reshuffled the deck. I mean, and you look at 2 things that happened to Marco Rubio, who came in with the momentum. The Santorum interview, which he and his team had to explain away for a day why a guy who just supported him couldn't list a single accomplishment, and then they put out a list of their accomplishments that were so thin that
he didn't show up
he had to defend for the next 2 days.
This defines the week between Iowa and New Hampshire, a big dramatic change. Look, before the Santorum interview, there was a sense that Marco Rubio might be...
Rubio Mentum.
Might win.
Well, might win the New Hampshire primary or finish a strong set. Clear the field of the other establishment candidates, and if the establishment candidate was going to be the nominee, he could have been the nominee against Trump and Cruz by South Carolina. He truly could have. He's gone from that now to fighting to stay in this race. If he finishes 4th or 5th here, he may have trouble going forward.
And he's scraping. He even was using those same lines the next day and trying to make sense of them. The reaction to Rubio's debate performance was not kind.
Rubio drew ridicule for repeating himself repeatedly.
Repeating canned, memorized lines.
Senator Rubio did step in it a couple of times.
To repeat over and over again your one-liners.
That was not a good moment for you, was it?
The only problem you have is the videotape.
He came out last night, George, with a pre-recorded stump speech in his head, and he couldn't hit pause.
People in Marco Rubio costumes showed up at his event.
Now will everybody see him through this lens? Is he prepared, and is he only a canned speech?
This could reinforce for some of those voters that there may not be another level.
Trying to assess how much harm may have been done to Marco Rubio tonight. His performance reminded me of nothing so much as Dan Quayle in the 1988 presidential debate when he was asked repeatedly what he would do if he suddenly became president in the aftermath of something happening to the president. And he fumbled the question once, and he fumbled it again, asked it again. I happened to be the one who asked it. And then Tom Brokaw put it to him a third time, and he fumbled it again, and that led to the famous moment when Lloyd Bentsen, who was running for vice president for the Democrats, he mentioned Jack Kennedy. It was all about youth. His answer kept saying, "You're saying I can't do this because I'm too young. That's what you're saying." And he mentioned Kennedy and how young he was, and Bentsen. He said, Senator, I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine, and Senator, you know Jack Kennedy, and the place went crazy.
So it was that kind of moment.
Well, it was the kind of thing where it fed a narrative about him that he was young and inexperienced. He was then a young senator, and so these things can have a lasting impression.
Okay.
So Willie's got more from the Wall Street Journal editorial board, but Britt Hume,
the Journal writes, Marco gets poloed. A single debate, they write, rarely turns a presidential campaign. For that, Marco Rubio is fortunate because his gutting by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie on Saturday was as complete as any we've seen. The question is whether that exchange and a strong performance by all three GOP governors will be enough to change the trend in New Hampshire and beyond. Mr. Rubio had to know this was coming, but his now famous response became a loop of repetitive spin about Mr. Obama knowing, quote, exactly what he's doing, as if someone had plugged in a tape that stuck. The moment was striking in part because Mr. Rubio has been so fluent in debates. It may also make some voters wonder if that fluency is less about conviction than about soundbite memorization. That's the thing, too, is that we knew this was coming. Right. The day Iowa ended on Tuesday of last week, Chris Christie started with the boy in the bubble. We knew he was going to come after Marco Rubio.
Yeah,
that's why it was surprising that Rubio wasn't better equipped.
Really surprised. John Heilman, so right after the debate, I turned immediately to Fox. Yeah. Because a lot of commentators on Fox have been quietly seeming to root for Marco Rubio. Yeah. The entire sort of mainstream conservative press is cheering for Marco Rubio. They should deliver in-kind contributions for his campaign every day. And yet there was Bill Kristol talking about how he was having to question his support. I'm going to talk to Bill in a second. There was Britt Hume doing the same thing, and there were the leading voices in conservative media, all, well, stating what's actually true, stating the obvious that Marco Rubio wasn't ready for.
Right. Well, this sense of, again, the notion that the big question is Marco Rubio really ready to be the establishment consensus, mainstream alternative, has been the question for now a year since he got into the race. And there was going to be a moment where you were going to get an answer. Christie, Mike and I saw it in Exeter yesterday, and I said to Christie, I said, you've been telegraphing this punch for a week. You told him you were going to punch him. You told him how you were going to punch him. You told him where you were going to punch him.
By the way, I think that is what has been most disturbing for his supporters. Yeah.
And so
that he knew the punch was coming.
I said all those things, and I said, so what does it tell you about Marco Rubio that you told him when, where, why, and how, and yet he still reacted this way? And Christie just looked at me and said, not ready. Yeah. He's just not ready. And that, I think, is going to reverberate, and already has reverberated, throughout all the Republican Party.